Jiho couldn't believe he was actually here. At 25, he was the youngest person ever chosen for a first contact mission. His hands shook slightly as he walked through the corridors of the diplomatic ship New Seoul. The metal walls hummed with energy, and through the windows he could see stars rushing past them at incredible speeds. "Hey, you okay?" asked Captain Mina as she noticed Jiho staring out into space. She was a tough woman in her 40s, with kind eyes but a serious expression. "I know this is your first big mission," Jiho nodded, trying to look more confident than he felt. "I'm just thinking about what we're about to do, meeting aliens for the first time ever. It's kind of crazy when you think about it." Captain Mina smiled. "It is crazy, but that's why we picked you. Your research on alien psychology was brilliant, plus you speak 17 languages. That brain of yours is exactly what we need." They walked to the main briefing room where the rest of the team was waiting. The room was filled with Earth's best diplomats, scientists, and translators. Everyone looked nervous but excited. Large screens showed images of the Vorthak Empire and their territories. "Listen up, everyone," Captain Mina said as she stood at the front. "In 6 hours we'll meet Queen Yura of the Vorthak Empire. This is not going to be easy." She clicked a button and horrifying images appeared on the screen. Destroyed planets, burning cities and massive alien ships. The Vorthak have conquered 40 star systems in the past 50 years. They don't negotiate. They don't show mercy. They simply take what they want. Jiho felt his stomach drop. The images showed the remains of civilizations that had tried to resist the Vorthak. Beautiful cities turned to ash, entire species wiped out or enslaved. Queen Yura herself has personally led the destruction of 12 different civilizations, Mina continued. She's considered the most dangerous being in this part of the galaxy. Our intelligence says she's massive, covered in scales that change color based on her mood, and has claws that can cut through steel. One of the older diplomats raised his hand. "Captain, why are we even trying to talk to her? It sounds like she only understands violence." "Because," Mina replied, "humanity has just started expanding into space. We have colonies on 15 planets now, and they're all in the path of Vorthak expansion. We can either try to make peace, or we can prepare for a war we probably can't win." Jiho looked around the room at his fellow humans. Some looked scared, others determined. He thought about his little sister Hana back on Earth, going to school and dreaming about becoming a pilot. He thought about all the families living on the new human colonies, not knowing that a terrible alien empire was moving toward them. "How I plan?" asked Dr. Suho, the team's lead scientist. "We're going to offer them something they've never had before," Mina said. "We're going to offer them friendship, real partnership instead of conquest, trade instead of war. It's risky, but hurts our only chance." Jiho checked his translator device one more time. It was a small earpiece that would instantly translate any alien language. At least that's what the engineers promised. No one had actually tested it on Vorthak language before. Through the ship's windows, a massive shadow began to block out the stars. The Vorthak flagship was approaching, and it was bigger than anything humanity had ever built. It looked like a giant metal beast with sharp edges and glowing red lights. "Remember," Captain Mina said as they prepared to board the shuttle, "that would take them to the alien ship. We represent all of humanity today. Stay calm, be respectful, and whatever happens, don't do anything that might start a war." Jiho nodded, but his heart was beating so fast he thought everyone could hear it. In just a few minutes, he would be face to face with the most feared creature in the galaxy. The shuttle docked with a loud clang that echoed through the metal corridors. Jiho's heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear Captain Mina's final instructions. The airlock hissed open, and they stepped into the alien ship. Everything was different from human ships. The walls were made of some kind of dark crystal that seemed to pulse with its own light. The air smelled strange, like copper mixed with something sweet. Strange symbols glowed along the walls, probably writing in the Vorthak language. 2 massive alien guards escorted them through winding hallways. These weren't the Queen, but they were still terrifying. They walked on 2 legs like humans, but they were much bigger and covered in thick, dark scales. Their eyes glowed yellow in the dim light, and Jiho could hear their claws clicking against the crystal floor with each step. "Stay close," whispered Captain Mina, "and remember, no sudden movements." The throne room was unlike anything Jiho had ever imagined. The entire ceiling was made of clear crystal, showing the stars outside. Strange plants with glowing leaves grew along the walls. In the center of the room sat a massive throne that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black stone. And on that throne sat Queen Yura. Jiho had seen the pictures in their briefings, but nothing could have prepared him for seeing her in person. She was enormous, at least 8 feet tall even while sitting down. Her body was covered in beautiful emerald scales that shifted and changed color as she moved. Her arms were longer than human arms, ending in hands with razor-sharp claws that could probably slice through metal. But what really caught Jiho's attention were her eyes. They were large and intelligent, with an almost human-like quality that surprised him. For all her fearsome appearance, there was something in those eyes. That reminded him of his sister, when she was nervous about giving a school presentation. "So," Queen Yura's voice boomed through the crystal chamber, "the pathetic humans have finally come to beg for mercy." Captain Mina stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, we come in peace. We hope to discuss a beneficial arrangement between our peoples." The Queen laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was cold and threatening. "Beneficial? You tiny creatures have nothing I want. Your worlds will make nice additions to my empire, and your people will serve as workers in my mines." As she spoke, her scales rippled with deeper shades of red and black. The colors moved across her body like waves, and Jiho realized this must be how Vorthak showed their emotions. Right now she was displaying anger and dominance, but then something interesting happened. As Queen Yura continued her threatening speech, Jiho noticed her tail. It was long and thick, ending in a sharp point, and it was twitching nervously behind the throne. The movement was small but constant, like when his cat used to twitch its tail when it was anxious. Even more interesting, her scales weren't staying the solid red and black of anger. Every few seconds, little flickers of other colors would appear and disappear quickly, as if she was trying to hide them. Purple, blue, even some yellow, all mixing with the dominant, angry colors. "Your expansion into space ends here," the Queen continued, standing up to her full, impressive height. "I have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than yours." She bared her fangs, which were indeed as terrifying as the reports had said. Each one was as long as Jiho's finger and looked sharp enough to cut through anything. Her claws extended further, catching the light from the crystal ceiling. She was clearly trying to look as scary as possible, but instead of being more frightened, Jiho found himself almost smiling. The way she was trying so hard to be intimidating, combined with her nervous tail and the uncertain colors flickering through her scales, reminded him so much of his little sister Hana when she dressed up as a monster for Halloween. Hana would put on her scariest costume and practice her meanest face in the mirror, but she could never quite hide the fact that she was just a sweet kid playing pretend. The thought was so amusing that Jiho let out a small chuckle before he could stop himself. The entire throne room went silent. Every guard, every diplomat, even the glowing plants seemed to freeze. "You're actually pretty cute when you're trying to be scary," Jiho said, the words tumbling out of his mouth before his brain could stop them. What happened next was something no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. Queen Yura's scales, which had been rippling with threatening reds and blacks, suddenly turned completely bright pink. Not just a little pink, but the most brilliant, vibrant pink anyone had ever seen. And then the most feared creature in the known universe made a sound that was definitely not threatening. It was small, high-pitched, and sounded almost exactly like a squeak. The silence in the throne room lasted for what felt like forever. Queen Yura stood frozen, her scales still that brilliant pink color, staring at Jiho with wide eyes. The human diplomatic team looked like they wanted to disappear into the crystal floor. Then everything happened at once. The Vorthak guards roared with anger and moved toward Jiho with their claws extended. Their own scales turned deep red with rage. "How dare you insult our queen?" one of them bellowed. "You will die for this." Captain Mina stepped in front of Jiho, her hands raised. "Wait, there's been a misunderstanding." But the guards weren't listening. They were seconds away from slicing through the entire human delegation when Queen Yura suddenly made a sharp hissing sound that echoed through the crystal chamber. "Stop!" she commanded. Every guard froze instantly. Their claws were just inches from the humans, but they didn't move another step. In Vorthak society, the Queen's word was absolute law. Queen Yura was still bright pink, and now she seemed to be struggling with something. Her tail was switching back and forth rapidly, and those uncertain colors were flickering through her scales even faster than before. She looked confused, maybe even a little panicked. "Everyone out," she said, her voice much quieter than before. I need time to decide their punishment." The guards looked confused. Usually insults to the Queen meant immediate death, but they couldn't disobey her direct orders. "Your Majesty," one of the guards said carefully, "surely this human should be executed immediately for such disrespect." I said, "Out." Queen Yura's voice boomed again, and this time her scales flashed with dangerous red streaks mixed with the pink. "I will decide what happens to them. Take them to the guest quarters and guard them well." The guards bowed and began escorting the human team out of the throne room. As they walked past the Queen, Jiho couldn't help but notice that she was still staring at him with those large, intelligent eyes. Her pink scales were slowly starting to fade back to their normal emerald color, but not completely. The guest quarters on the Vorthak ship were surprisingly comfortable. The rooms were large, with crystal walls that showed beautiful views of space. But none of the humans were in the mood to appreciate the scenery. "What were you thinking?" Captain Mina exploded as soon as the door closed behind them. She was pacing back and forth, her face red with anger and worry. "We came here to prevent a war, and you just insulted the most dangerous being in the galaxy." Jiho sat down heavily on one of the strange alien chairs. "I didn't mean to insult her. I was trying to give her a compliment." "A compliment?" Dr. Suho looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "You called the Queen of the Vorthak Empire cute. Do you know what that word probably means in their culture?" "Actually," Jiho said quietly, "I don't think it means anything in their culture." "I think that's the problem." The other diplomats stared at him. Captain Mina stopped pacing. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Did you see how she reacted?" Jiho explained. "She didn't get angry like someone who'd been insulted. She got embarrassed. Those pink scales, that little squeaking sound she made, that wasn't the reaction of someone who felt threatened or disrespected." "Then what was it?" asked Dr. Suho. "I think," Jiho said slowly, "it was the reaction of someone who'd never been complimented before. Someone who didn't know how to handle being called something nice instead of feared." Meanwhile, in her private chambers deep within the ship, Queen Yura was having her own crisis. She sat on a smaller throne made of the same black stone, but this room was filled with strange plants and glowing crystals that cast soft light everywhere. Her advisor Crix, an older Vorthak with darker scales and wise eyes, stood before her. "My Queen," Crix said carefully, "the guards are confused about why you didn't execute the human immediately. They're starting to whisper." Queen Yura's scales flickered with that pink color again, just for a moment. "Crix, in all your years of service, has anyone ever called me cute?" Crix looked genuinely puzzled. "Cute, my queen? I'm not familiar with this human word. What does it mean?" "That's what I want to know," the Queen said, standing up and beginning to pace, just like Captain Mina had been doing. The human's translator device was working perfectly. I understood every other word he said, but this one, cute, it made me feel strange. "Strange how, Your Majesty?" Queen Yura paused, struggling to find the words. When he said it, something happened inside me. My scales changed color without my permission. I made that sound. I've never made a sound like that before in my life. Crix had served the royal family for 60 years. He had seen Queen Yura conquer worlds, destroy entire fleets, and negotiate the surrender of countless species. But he had never seen her look so confused and uncertain. "Perhaps," he suggested gently, "we should research this human word. Understanding their language might help us understand their intentions." "Yes," Queen Yura said, her scales shifting to a determined purple. "Find out what cute means. And Crix, find out why it made me feel things I've never felt before." Back in the guest quarters, the humans waited nervously for their fate to be decided. None of them knew that their simple word had started something that would change the entire galaxy. 3 days passed in the guest quarters, and Jiho was starting to think they might spend the rest of their lives there. The other diplomats had stopped talking to him much, except to remind him that he'd probably gotten them all killed. Captain Mina tried to stay positive, but even she looked worried. Then, on the 4th morning, a guard arrived with an unexpected message. "The Queen requests a private audience with the human called Jiho," the guard announced. His scales were a neutral brown color, which Jiho had learned meant the Vorthak was trying to stay emotionally neutral. Captain Mina jumped up. "I should come with him. As team leader, it's my responsibility." "The Queen was very specific," the guard replied. "Only Jiho. She will see him in her private gardens." The other team members looked at Jiho like he was walking to his execution. Dr. Suho patted his shoulder. "It's been an honor working with you," he said sadly. "Don't be so dramatic," Jiho said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Maybe she just wants to talk." The walk through the ship took much longer this time. Instead of going to the throne room, the guard led Jiho deeper into the vessel, through corridors he hadn't seen before. These hallways were different too. The crystal walls were lighter in color, and strange music seemed to float through the air. "Where exactly are we going?" Jiho asked. "The Queen's private sanctuary," the guard replied. "No outsider has ever been allowed there before. You should feel honored, even if you are about to die." That wasn't exactly comforting, but Jiho tried to stay calm. They passed through several security doors that opened automatically as they approached. Finally, they reached a large circular door that looked like it was made of living wood rather than metal or crystal. "The Queen waits for you inside," the guard said. "I will remain here." Jiho took a deep breath and stepped through the door. What he saw took his breath away completely. He was standing in the most beautiful garden he'd ever seen. The ceiling was entirely transparent, showing the stars and distant galaxies above. But it was the plants that made him gasp. Flowers the size of dinner plates glowed with soft blue and purple light. Trees with silver bark stretched toward the ceiling, their leaves changing colors like tiny rainbows. Streams of water flowed through the garden, and the water itself seemed to sparkle with its own light. The air smelled like honey and fresh. Trinity in the center of it all, sitting on a simple stone bench next to a glowing pond, was Queen Yura. She looked different here, smaller somehow, even though she was still 8 feet tall. Her scales were a soft green color, much gentler than the threatening emerald from the throne room. She wasn't wearing any of her royal armor or jewelry. For the first time, she actually looked peaceful. "Come closer, human," she said, and her voice was quieter too. "We need to talk." Jiho walked carefully through the garden, trying not to step on any of the glowing flowers. As he got closer, he noticed that Queen Yura's tail was doing that nervous, twitching again. "Sit," she commanded, pointing to another stone bench across from her. Jiho sat down, and for a moment they just looked at each other across the sparkling pond. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was definitely heavy with unspoken questions. "My advisor Crix has researched your word," Queen Yura finally said. "Cute. He tells me it means small, attractive, or endearing. Is this correct?" "Yes, that's right," Jiho nodded. Her scales flickered with those uncertain colors again. "Then you were complimenting me?" "I was trying to," Jiho said honestly, though I realize now it probably wasn't the best choice of words for a first meeting. Queen Yura leaned forward, and Jiho could see genuine confusion in her large eyes. "But why would you compliment me? Everyone fears me. Entire civilizations surrender at the mention of my name. No one has ever called me anything except Your Majesty or Destroyer of Worlds." Jiho thought about how to explain this. "Well, when you were trying to intimidate us in the throne room, I noticed you were nervous. Your tail was twitching, and your scales kept changing colors like you weren't sure how to feel. It reminded me of my little sister Hana back on Earth." "Your sister?" The Queen's scales shifted to deep purple swirls, which Jiho was learning meant confusion. "Yeah, she's 15 now, but when she was younger, she used to practice being tough in front of the mirror. She'd make scary faces and try to look mean, but I could always tell she was just pretending. There was something sweet about how hard she was trying." Queen Yura stared at him for a long moment. "You were not mocking me?" You were not trying to make me appear weak in front of my subjects. Never, Jiho said, putting as much sincerity into his voice as he could. I thought you were trying so hard to be fierce and intimidating, but underneath all that, you seemed lonely. The word hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they should cross. Queen Yura's scales went through a whole rainbow of colors before settling on a soft, sad blue. Lonely, she repeated quietly. No one has ever used that word to describe me either. That first conversation in the garden lasted for hours. As the artificial day cycle dimmed to evening, Queen Yura began to open up in ways that surprised even herself. You want to know the truth about being a queen? She asked, her scales shifting to that sad blue color again. I was 3 years old. When my parents died in battle, the royal advisors took me and trained me to be the perfect weapon. Jiho listened quietly, not wanting to interrupt. He could see this was difficult for her to talk about. Every day from age 3 to age 20 was the same, she continued. Combat training, strategy lessons, and speeches about how fear makes you strong. They told me that caring about others was weakness. That friendship was a luxury I couldn't afford. That sounds terrible, Jiho said softly. What about other kids your age? Didn't you have anyone to play with? Queen Yura's laugh was bitter. Play? I learned that word from your human databases yesterday. We don't have that concept in Vorthak culture. Children are trained for their future roles from birth, and future queens are trained alone. She stood up and walked to one of the glowing trees, running her claws gently along its silver bark. I've conquered 40 star systems, but I've never had a single real conversation with anyone. My subjects are too afraid to disagree with me. My advisors only tell me what they think I want to hear. Even my own people step back when I walk past them. Jiho felt his heart break a little. That's not living. That's just existing. Is it different for humans? She asked, turning back to him. Your species seems so connected to each other, and so Jiho began to tell her about human relationships. He talked about his sister Hana and how she would sneak into his room during thunderstorms when they were kids. He described family dinners where everyone talked at once and nobody minded the chaos. He explained how his college friends would stay up all night playing games and talking about their dreams. How you actually choose to spend time with people who serve no strategic purpose, Queen Yura asked, her scales flickering with fascination. That's the whole point, Jiho laughed. The best friendships are the ones where you don't need anything from each other except company. Like my friend Wu Jin back home is terrible at everything useful. He can't fix things, he's not good at sports, and he burns water when he tries to cook. But he makes the best jokes, and he always knows how to cheer people up when they're sad. Queen Yura sat back down, her scales now showing warm yellow streaks. And this friendship? It makes you happy? The happiest, Jiho said. Humans have a saying, no one is happy alone. We're not built for isolation. But what about power? Control? If you're not feared, how do you maintain authority? Jiho pulled out his communication device and showed her pictures from Earth. See this? He showed her a photo of a crowded street festival. These people aren't here because they're forced to be. They're here because they want to celebrate together. And this leader. He showed her a picture of Earth's president speaking to a crowd. People follow her because they trust her, not because they're afraid. Queen Yura studied the images with intense curiosity. They look happy, she said, as if the word was foreign to her. They are. And here's the amazing part. When people are happy, they work harder, they're more creative, they solve problems better. Fear might make people obey, but joy makes them thrive. Over the following weeks, these secret meetings became a regular thing. Queen Yura would summon Jiho to her gardens, always with the excuse that she was interrogating the prisoner. But really, she was learning to be human. Jiho taught her simple games like rock, paper, scissors, which made her scales flash with delighted golden colors when she won. He showed her more pictures of Earth, mountains, oceans, cities filled with laughing people. He even taught her some human songs, though her attempts at singing were more like musical roars. Your species creates art just for beauty, she asked one day, looking at pictures of human paintings and sculptures. Some of the Greatest art comes from the worst times, Jiho explained. When people are sad or angry or afraid, they make something beautiful to remind themselves that life is still worth living. Queen Yura was quiet for a long time after that. I've never created anything, she said finally, only destroyed. It's not too late to start, Jiho said gently. The changes in Queen Yura didn't go unnoticed. Her personal guards began whispering about how their queen's scales showed new colors now. Instead of the constant reds and blacks of anger and dominance, she displayed warm golds, peaceful blues, and even occasional flashes of happy yellow. Her advisor, Crix, noticed that she asked different questions during briefings. Instead of, how do we conquer them? She started asking, what do they need, and how can we help? When a minor dispute arose between two vassal planets, Queen Yura shocked everyone by suggesting mediation instead of punishment. When her generals questioned this new approach, she simply said, we will try a different strategy. But the biggest change was in how she treated her own people. Guards reported that the Queen had started saying please and thank you, words that had never been heard in the royal court before. She began asking her servants about their families, their hobbies, their lives outside the palace. One day, her head chef was so surprised when she complimented his cooking that he nearly fainted. Your Majesty has you've never noticed the food before, he stammered. Well, I'm noticing now, she replied, her scales showing gentle green contentment. And it's delicious. The kitchen staff talked about that moment for weeks. Their terrifying queen had actually tasted her food and liked it. More importantly, she had spoken to them like they were real people instead of just servants. As word spread through the ship, then through the fleet, and eventually across the empire, everyone began to wonder the same thing. What had happened to their queen? And more importantly, was this strange new gentleness a sign of strength or weakness? Only Jiho knew the truth. Queen Yura wasn't becoming weak. She was finally learning how to be strong in a completely different way. The first real test of Queen Yura's changing mindset came 3 weeks into Jiho's stay aboard her flagship. He was in the garden, teaching her how to play a simple human card game, when Advisor Crix burst through the doors with urgent news. Your Majesty, Crix said, his scales flashing with alarm colors, the Kleban Federation has established mining operations in the Nexus system. They're extracting rare crystals from our border worlds without permission. Jiho watched Queen Yura's reaction carefully. Her scales immediately shifted to the familiar angry reds, and her claws extended instinctively. For a moment, she looked exactly like the terrifying conqueror from their first meeting. Prepare the war fleet, she started to say, then stopped. Her scales flickered with uncertainty. She looked at Jiho, then back at Crix. Actually, give me more details first. How many ships do they have? Are they harming any of our people? Crix looked confused. Normally, Queen Yura would have launched an attack within hours of hearing about territorial violations. They have a small mining fleet, perhaps 20 ships. No weapons that we can detect, and, well, technically the Nexus system is disputed territory. Both our species have claimed it, but neither has established permanent settlements there. So they're not actually attacking us? Queen Yura asked. Well, no, Your Majesty, but they're taking resources that rightfully belong to the Vorthak Empire. Queen Yura was quiet for a long moment, her scales cycling through different colors as she thought. Finally, she turned to Jiho. What would humans do in this situation? Jiho was surprised to be asked directly in front of one of her advisors, but he answered honestly. We'd probably try talking to them first. Find out what they need those crystals for, see if there's a way for everyone to benefit. Crix's scales turned an alarmed orange. Your Majesty, surely you're not considering negotiating with trespassers? Why not? Queen Yura asked. Jiho, explain this human concept you told me about. What did you call it? Compromise? It's when both sides give up something small to get something bigger that they both want, Jiho explained. Like maybe the Klebans need those crystals for something important, but they also have something we need. Instead of fighting over one thing, we could trade, and both end up better than before. Crix looked like Jiho had suggested they all start dancing naked. Your Majesty, the Vorthak Empire has never compromised. We take what we want through strength. And how has that worked out? Queen Yura asked quietly. We have 40 systems, but half of them rebel constantly. We spend more resources controlling our territory than we gain from it. Maybe it's time to try something different. Over the next few days, Queen Yura did something unprecedented in Vorthak history. Instead of sending warships to the Nexus system, she sent a single diplomatic vessel with a message requesting a meeting with Kleban leadership. The Klebans were so shocked by this approach that it took them 2 days to respond. They had been preparing for the inevitable Vorthak attack, not a polite invitation to negotiate. When the Kleban delegation arrived, Jiho found himself in the unusual position of helping an alien queen prepare for her first real diplomatic meeting. They practiced in the garden, with Jiho playing the role of the Kleban ambassador. Remember, he coached her, start by acknowledging their perspective. Don't threaten them right away. Ask questions about what they need. But what if they think I'm weak? Queen Yura worried, her scales showing nervous purples. Confidence and strength aren't the same as aggression, Jiho explained. You can be powerful without being scary. Think of it like being a good teacher instead of a harsh master. The actual meeting took place in a neutral chamber, not the intimidating throne room. Queen Yura had chosen to wear simpler robes and fewer weapons. When the Kleban delegation entered, small bird-like beings with bright feathers and intelligent black eyes, she didn't roar or bare her fangs. Instead, she said, "Welcome aboard my ship. I understand you have operations in the Nexus system. I'd like to learn more about your needs there." The lead Kleban diplomat, a female named Chirik, looked genuinely surprised. "Your Majesty, we expected threats, not questions." "I'm trying a new approach," Queen Yura said, and Jiho caught the hint of humor in her voice. "Please, tell me about these crystals you're mining. What do you use them for?" What followed was the most productive diplomatic discussion in Vorthak history. The Klebans explained that they needed the crystals to power their medical facilities. Their homeworld was suffering from a plague that could only be treated with crystal-powered healing devices. In return, Queen Yura learned that the Klebans had developed incredibly advanced agricultural techniques that could triple crop yields on any planet. The Vorthak Empire, with its focus on conquest, had always struggled to feed its growing population. "So you need crystals to save lives, and we need food to feed our people," Queen Yura summarized. "What if we shared the Nexus system? You mine crystals, we establish farming colonies, and we trade with each other." Chirik's feathers ruffled with excitement. "You would share territory with us?" "Why not? We both get what we need, and nobody has to die for it." The agreement they hammered out over the next week became known as the Nexus Accords. Not only did it solve the immediate crisis, but it established the first peaceful partnership in Vorthak history. The Klebans would provide agricultural technology and food production, while the Vorthak would offer protection and mineral resources. But more importantly, news of the peaceful resolution spread throughout both empires and beyond. Other species began to whisper that maybe, just maybe, the terrifying Queen Yura could be reasoned with. Crix and the other advisors were amazed by the results. "Your Majesty," Crix said privately, "the Nexus arrangement is already producing twice the resources we would have gained from simple conquest, with none of the ongoing rebellion costs." "Interesting," Queen Yura mused, her scales showing satisfied gold colors. "It's almost as if cooperation is more efficient than domination." Word of the Queen's strange new approach reached every corner of the galaxy. Some species were skeptical, thinking it might be a trap. Others were hopeful that the age of Vorthak terror might finally be ending. But in the royal gardens, as Jiho taught Queen Yura another human card game, they both knew this was just the beginning. They had proven that even the most feared empire in the galaxy could learn to make friends instead of enemies. "So what's next?" Jiho asked, as Queen Yura won another hand of cards, her scales flashing with delighted yellow. "Next," she said with something that might have been a smile, "we're going to change everything. News travels fast in space, especially when it's about something no one thought possible. Within months of the Nexus Accords, every major species in the galaxy had heard the impossible rumor. Queen Yura of the Vorthak Empire was actually negotiating instead of conquering. At first, nobody believed it. The Zephyrian Council laughed when their scouts reported that Vorthak ships were offering trade routes instead of surrender demands. The Stellar Union dismissed early reports as propaganda. Even the peaceful Aquarian Federation thought it had to be some kind of elaborate trap, but the evidence kept piling up. Ships that should have been destroyed were instead being escorted safely through Vorthak space. Planets that expected invasion fleets received diplomatic envoys offering beneficial trade agreements. Most shocking of all, Queen Yura herself was seen in holographic communications, her scales showing soft blues and gentle greens instead of the threatening reds everyone associated with Vorthak conquest. "It's like she's become a completely different person," reported Captain Thorne of the merchant vessel Silverwing. "Last year, seeing a Vorthak ship meant running for your life. Now they're asking if we need escort protection through dangerous space lanes." In the royal gardens aboard Queen Yura's flagship, Jiho was teaching her about human art when Crix arrived with another unusual request. Your Majesty," Crix said, his scales showing excited yellow patches. "We've received a message from the Corvan Republic and the Thraxian Empire. They're requesting our assistance with a border dispute." Queen Yura looked up from the small sculpture she'd been attempting to carve. "Are they asking us to conquer someone for them?" "No, Your Majesty, they want us to mediate. They've heard about our success with the Klebans and want our help finding a peaceful solution." Jiho grinned. "See? Word is getting out that you're good at solving problems instead of creating them." "But I've never mediated between other species before," Queen Yura said, her scales flickering with nervous purples. "What if I mess it up?" "You won't," Jiho assured her. "And besides, I'll be there to help." The situation between the Corvan Republic and the Thraxian Empire was complicated. Both species were humanoid, but that's where the similarities ended. The Corvans were logical, methodical people who valued order and precision. They lived in perfectly planned cities and made decisions based purely on data and facts. The Thraxians were their complete opposite. They were emotional, artistic, and spontaneous. They built beautiful but chaotic cities that grew organically, and they made decisions based on feelings and instinct. The problem was a planet called Haven's Rest, located right between their territories. Both species had legitimate claims to it, and both had already started establishing settlements there. Tensions were rising daily, and some hotheads on both sides were calling for war. "This is going to be interesting," Jiho said as their shuttle approached the neutral meeting station where the negotiations would take place. "These two species are so different, they probably can't even understand each other's point of view." Queen Yura's scales were cycling through determined purple and confident gold. "That's exactly why they need help. Sometimes it takes an outsider to see what people who are too close to a problem can't see." The meeting station was a marvel of neutral architecture, designed to make no species feel more comfortable than any other. When they arrived, both delegations were already there, sitting on opposite sides of a large conference room and glaring at each other. The Corvan delegation leader, Administrator Vex, was a tall, thin being with pale blue skin and perfectly arranged clothing. Everything about him screamed order and control. Across from him sat General Zara of the Thraxians, a shorter but more muscular woman with bright orange skin that seemed to shift colors with her emotions. Her clothing was beautiful but chaotic, with flowing fabrics in multiple bright colors. "Your Majesty," Administrator Vex said formally as Queen Yura entered, "we appreciate your willingness to assist in this matter. I have prepared a detailed analysis of our territorial claims, including historical data, resource surveys, and population projections." Before Queen Yura could respond, General Zara jumped up from her chair. "Don't listen to his boring numbers. Haven's Rest is a world of incredible beauty and spiritual significance. Our people have dreamed of it for generations. Dreams are not legally binding documents," Vex replied coldly. "And documents can't capture the soul of a place," Zara shot back. Jiho watched Queen Yura carefully. Her scales were showing calm green, but he could see the tiny flickers of other colors that meant she was thinking hard. "Tell me about Haven's Rest," she said simply. "Not your claims to it, but the planet itself. What makes it special?" Over the next hour, something amazing happened. As both sides described the planet they both wanted, A picture emerged of a world that was perfect for both species, but in different ways. Haven's Rest had vast mineral deposits that the logical Corvins could mine efficiently, but it also had incredible natural beauty and unique ecosystems that spoke to the Thraxian soul. It had large continents perfect for organized cities, but also scattered islands ideal for artistic communities. "You're both right," Queen Yura said finally. "Haven's Rest is exactly what each of your species needs. The question is, why does that have to be a problem?" "Because there's only one planet," Administrator Vex said logically. "But there are two species with different needs," Jiho added, catching on to Queen Yura's thinking. "What if, instead of fighting over who gets the planet, you figured out how to share it in a way that gives everyone what they actually want?" What followed was the most creative negotiation session in galactic history. Queen Yura's natural authority kept both sides focused and respectful, while Jiho's human perspective helped them see possibilities they'd never considered. The Corvins got the mining rights and the large continents for their organized cities. The Thraxians got the islands and the right to establish artistic communities throughout the planet's most beautiful areas. Both species would work together on environmental protection, combining Corvin efficiency with Thraxian creativity. Most importantly, Haven's Rest would become a symbol of cooperation rather than conflict. The planet would host an annual festival where both species would celebrate their partnership, and children from both cultures would grow up together, learning from each other. "This is actually a better outcome than either of us hoped for," Administrator Vex admitted, his formal mask slipping for a moment. "It's beautiful," General Zara said, her skin glowing with happy colors. "Our children will inherit a world where differences are celebrated, not feared." As news of the Haven's Rest Accord spread, something unprecedented happened. Other species began specifically requesting the human Vorthak mediation team for their own disputes. The galaxy's most feared empire had somehow become its most trusted peacekeepers. "I never thought I'd live to see the day," Crix told Queen Yura as they reviewed requests for mediation from 6 different systems. "The Vorthak Empire is more respected now than when we ruled through fear." Queen Yura's scales showed satisfied gold as she looked at Jiho. "Turns out making friends is more powerful than making enemies." Jiho smiled, thinking about how far they'd both come from that first awkward meeting in the throne room. Who would have thought that calling someone cute could change the entire galaxy? 6 months after that first disastrous meeting in the Crystal Throne Room, representatives from dozens of species gathered for something that had never happened before in galactic history, a voluntary peace summit hosted by the Vorthak Empire. The entire venue was spectacular. Queen Yura had transformed her largest battleship into a floating conference center, with gardens and meeting halls that accommodated the environmental needs of dozens of different species. Where once there had been weapon storage, now there were art galleries displaying works from across the galaxy. Where military officers once planned conquests, diplomats now worked together on trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Jiho stood in the main observation deck, watching ships arrive from every corner of known space. There were the logical Corvins, with their perfectly geometric vessels, the artistic Thraxians in ships that looked like flying sculptures, the bird-like Klebans in craft that seemed to soar even while stationary, and dozens of other species he was still learning about. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" Queen Yura said, joining him at the window. Her scales were showing a mixture of proud gold and nervous blue. "A year ago, most of these ships would have fled at the sight of a Vorthak fleet. Now they're coming here voluntarily to sign peace treaties," Jiho replied. "That's incredible progress." Captain Mina approached them, carrying a thick folder of documents. "Your Majesty, Jiho, the final treaty drafts are ready for review. This is really happening." The treaty was unlike anything in galactic politics. Instead of the usual non-aggression pacts or trade agreements, this was a complete restructuring of how civilizations would interact. The Vorthak Empire would officially abandon its policy of conquest and expansion through force. Instead, they would grow through voluntary partnerships, mutual aid, and beneficial trade relationships. But the most revolutionary part was Queen Yura's proposal for an interspecies cooperation council, a permanent organization dedicated to solving conflicts through mediation rather than war. Every member species would have a voice, regardless of their military power or economic strength. The idea is simple, Queen Yura explained to the assembled delegates in the main conference hall. We've all learned that cooperation produces better results than competition. Why shouldn't our entire galaxy operate on that principle? The Aquarian ambassador, a peaceful, blue-skinned being named Coral, raised a webbed hand. Your Majesty, forgive me for asking, but what guarantee do we have that the Vorthak Empire won't simply return to its old ways when convenient? It was a fair question, and everyone in the room leaned forward to hear the answer. Queen Yura's scales shifted to honest silver as she replied, "Because we've seen the proof that this new way works better," she said. "In 6 months of peaceful cooperation, the Vorthak Empire has gained more resources, more territory, and more security than we achieved in 50 years of conquest. Our people are happier, our economy is stronger, and we have friends instead of enemies." She gestured to Jiho. "But more than that, humanity has taught us something we never knew we were missing. They showed us that strength doesn't come from fear. It comes from trust. And once you've experienced real friendship, you can never go back to being satisfied with mere domination." Administrator Vex of the Corvins consulted his datapad. "Our analysis confirms Her Majesty's claims. The Vorthak Empire's resource acquisition has increased by 300% since adopting cooperative policies. Rebellion costs have dropped to 0. Overall efficiency is at an all-time high." General Zara of the Thraxians, her skin glowing with enthusiastic yellows and oranges, stood up. "But beyond the numbers, there's something more important. For the first time in our history, our children can grow up dreaming of exploration and discovery instead of hiding from conquest. That's worth more than any amount of resources." The formal signing ceremony took 3 days, as each species had their own traditions and requirements. Some signed with traditional ink, others used bioluminescent markings, and a few required complex rituals involving music or light displays. When it was humanity's turn, Queen Yura made an unexpected announcement. "I want to propose that Jiho of Earth be named as humanity's permanent representative to the Interspecies Cooperation Council," she said. "He has proven that sometimes the best diplomats are those who see past differences to find common ground." Jiho was shocked. "Your Majesty, I'm just a xenobiologist. I'm not even a real diplomat." "Exactly," she replied, her scales showing amused gold. "Real diplomats would have followed protocol and never called me cute. But your honesty and genuine care for others is what started all of this." Captain Mina stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth and humanity, we accept this honor. Jiho, you've already proven you can handle it." As the ceremonies concluded and the various delegations prepared to return home, Queen Yura asked Jiho to join her one last time in her private garden. The space had grown even more beautiful over the months, with new plants and flowers gifted by their various new allies. "I have something for you," she said, leading him to a small tree with silver bark and leaves that shimmered like starlight. "This is a remembrance tree from my homeworld. My people plant them to mark important moments in our lives." She carefully broke off a small branch, which immediately began to glow with soft light. "This cutting will grow anywhere, even on Earth. When you plant it, it will always remind you of what we accomplished together." Jiho accepted the gift carefully, feeling the warm energy pulsing through the branch. "Thank you, Yura. But I have to ask, do you ever regret how all of this started? I mean, I basically insulted you in front of your entire court." Queen Yura's scales shifted through several colors, before settling on grateful silver. "Your simple word changed everything," she said softly. "For 30 years, I ruled through fear and conquered through force. But I never knew what it felt like to be genuinely liked until you called me cute." She paused, looking out at the stars visible through the garden's crystal ceiling. "You gave me the most valuable gift in the universe. You saw me as a person instead of just a weapon. That one moment of honest kindness changed not just me, but the entire galaxy." As Jiho prepared to return to the human ship, he realized that their mission had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams. They hadn't just prevented a war, they had created a new era of galactic peace. And it all started because a nervous young scientist had looked at the galaxy's most feared conqueror and seen someone who just needed a friend. "So what's next for you?" Jiho asked as they said their goodbyes. Queen Yura's scales showed excited gold. "We're going to keep growing, but the right way this time. And Jiho, thank you for teaching me that cute is actually the best compliment anyone can receive." 1 year after Jiho had accidentally called an alien queen cute, he found himself standing in the Earth Command briefing room, looking out at faces filled with amazement and disbelief. The holographic display behind him showed a map of the galaxy that would have been unimaginable just 12 months earlier. Where once there had been the red zones marking Vorthak Empire territory, areas that human ships avoided at all costs, now there were green zones indicating the Vorthak Commonwealth. Even more incredible, dozens of other species had joined this peaceful federation, creating the largest cooperative alliance in galactic history. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," said Admiral Chen, leaning forward in her chair. "The most feared empire in the galaxy completely changed its entire philosophy because you called their queen cute?" Jiho smiled, thinking about how many times he'd been asked that exact question. "It's more complicated than that, but yes, essentially." The room erupted in laughter and amazed chatter. Even after hearing the full report, it seemed too incredible to believe. "Tell us about the Commonwealth now," requested Dr. Park, Earth's leading expert on alien politics. "How different is it from the old empire?" Jiho activated a new section of the holographic display. "It's like comparing a prison to a community center. The Vorthak Commonwealth now has 47 member species, all joined voluntarily. Instead of tribute and forced labor, they have trade agreements and cultural exchanges." The images showed bustling space stations where dozens of different alien species worked together. Former battleships had been converted into mobile universities and art galleries. Planets that once lived in fear now hosted festivals celebrating their diversity. Queen Yura, though she prefers to be called the peaceful sovereign now, has completely restructured how the Commonwealth operates, Jiho continued. "Decisions are made by council vote rather than royal decree. Each member species gets representation based on contribution, not military strength." Admiral Chen pulled up another report on her tablet. "Our intelligence says that Commonwealth territory is actually more prosperous now than when it was conquered. How is that possible?" "Happy people work harder," Jiho said simply. "When you're building something together instead of being forced to serve, you put your heart into it." The Kleban agricultural techniques have doubled food production across Commonwealth worlds. The Thraxian artists have created tourism industries on planets that were just mining operations before. The Corvan efficiency experts have streamlined everything from shipping to communication. He switched to another display showing economic data. But the real game changer is the Interspecies Cooperation Council. Instead of spending resources on conquest and suppressing rebellions, the Commonwealth now focuses on exploration, scientific research, and mutual aid. When the Zephyrian plague broke out last month, 12 different species contributed resources to help develop a cure. The old empire would have either ignored it or tried to profit from it. Captain Mina, who had been quietly listening, stood up. "What I find most remarkable is how quickly the change spread. It wasn't just the Vorthak who transformed. They inspired others." She was right. News of the Commonwealth's success had triggered what historians were already calling the Great Cooperation Movement. The Stellar Union had established its own council for peaceful conflict resolution. The Aquarian Federation had opened its borders to refugees from across the galaxy. Even the traditionally isolated crystalline collective had begun participating in interspecies cultural exchanges. "There's something else," Jiho said, his voice growing more serious. "Queen Yura told me something during our last meeting that I think is important for Earth to understand." The room quieted, sensing the weight of what he was about to say. She said that in all her years of conquest, she never encountered a species like humans. Most civilizations, when faced with overwhelming force, either submit completely or fight to the death. But humans, we try to understand. We look for the person behind the power, the individual behind the role. He paused, thinking about that first day in the crystal throne room. She said that in hundreds of diplomatic meetings, no one had ever really looked at her. They only saw the conqueror, the weapon, the threat. But I saw someone who was nervous and lonely, and I reacted to that instead of to her reputation. Dr. Park leaned forward with interest. Are you saying that our empathy is what made the difference? I think so, Jiho replied. And it's not just empathy. It's our willingness to take social risks. Most species have very rigid social hierarchies and protocols. The idea of a junior diplomat making a casual personal comment to a supreme ruler would be unthinkable. But humans, we connect with people across all kinds of boundaries. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. That does seem to be a uniquely human trait. We've seen it in our other first contact situations too. Our diplomats consistently achieve better results than expected. Here's what I think, Jiho said, moving to the final section of his presentation. As humanity expands into the galaxy, our greatest strength won't be our technology or our military might. It'll be our ability to make genuine friends with anyone, even terrifying alien queens who turn pink when they're embarrassed. The room chuckled at that, but the underlying message was serious. Earth Command was already beginning to restructure their approach to alien contact based on Jiho's experiences. The Commonwealth has requested that humanity establish permanent diplomatic missions on 12 worlds, Captain Mina added. They specifically want our people involved in their conflict resolution efforts. And, Jiho said with a grin, Queen Yura has personally invited me to officiate at her upcoming bonding ceremony. Apparently she's found love with a Thraxian artist who thinks her scale color changes are beautiful. As the briefing concluded and the officials filed out, Admiral Chen approached Jiho privately. You know, she said, we're rewriting our first contact protocols based on your mission. We're calling it the Jiho Doctrine. Treat every alien as an individual first and a representative of their species second. Jiho felt a warm glow of pride. I just hope it helps. The galaxy is a lot more interesting when everyone's getting along. Later that evening, Jiho stood in his apartment garden, carefully tending to the remembrance tree that Queen Yura had given him. The silver leaves shimmered in Earth sunlight, and small buds were already forming along its branches. His sister, Hana, bounded into the garden, home from school with her latest art project. Jiho, guess what? My teacher says I'm going to get to meet some real aliens next month when the Commonwealth Cultural Exchange comes to Earth. That's wonderful, Jiho said, ruffling her hair. Just remember, if you meet any scary-looking ones, try calling them cute. You never know what might happen. Hana laughed, not knowing that her brother's advice had literally changed the course of galactic history. As the remembrance tree's leaves caught the light, Jiho reflected on how a single moment of honest kindness had rippled outward to transform an entire galaxy. Sometimes the smallest gestures created the biggest changes, and sometimes the best weapon really was just seeing others as they truly were. Even blushing alien queens who just needed a friend